Hey everyone, Mr. Mse here. This is a guide for round 2 of the 2021 FIA Manufacturer Season Stage 2, taking place at Sardegna B with the Group 4 cars. Quick note, when you're about to start a new lap for time trial or qualifying, make sure you nail down this final turn, as if you get a fast exit, you'll be able to get a fast start to your new lap. I'll also slow the video down a couple times for some of the more technical parts of the track, and I am at +1 for brake balance for a bit more rotation. Your first braking point is just before the wall on the right end. Brake hard for a short while, and you want to pretty much attack this apex. So just as you're about to get onto the apex, you want to get on the throttle as soon as you can. You're pretty much fully committing to it, as there is a lot of time that can be shaved off through that turn itself. Then turn in when the curb on the right ends, and you want to try to take this left turn flat out, bring yourself towards the right, and brake just before you pass the ambulance that is on the right. Brake hard for a short moment, take your time easing off of the brakes, but start to gradually get on the throttle as soon as you hit the apex. Bring yourself towards the left, start to turn in, and use a little bit of braking as you're turning in. Make sure you hit the curb so you can rotate a bit more, and as you're about to point towards this wind turbine, that is when you can get on the throttle. This left turn can easily be taken flat out. Same goes for the upcoming left turn, but bring yourself towards the left, and just before you reach this machine, that is where you want to start to brake. And you want to be careful when you hit the apex. First of all, bring yourself all the way to the left, but just skim a bit of the apex, because if you take too much of the apex, the car will jump and you'll lose a lot of time. Then just after the barrier on the right starts, you want to use some of your braking power, and you want to also attack this apex, but do be aware that some cars may not like it if you go past the curb that is on the left. So do be aware that some cars may not like it if you dip into the grass. And you want to fully accelerate out of that turn. Do a small lift off of throttle if you need to. And for this final turn, you want to brake just before the black wall on the right starts. Use some of your braking power, try to skim a bit of the first apex, and then fully accelerate. Nail the final apex, but make sure your left wheels do not hit the blue stuff, otherwise you will get an off-track penalty. But that is pretty much it for the lap guide. Let's go ahead and finish this lap, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at the strategies. For the qualifying session, you only have 5 minutes to try to get a good qualifying time, but because Sardegna B is a somewhat small track, you will be able to get 3 laps before the qualifying session ends. And for the qualifying session, I left the brake balance on my Viper at +1 so I can rotate a bit better. Slipstream qualifying is pretty much going to be a thing for the higher splits. Also, as I mentioned earlier in the video, make sure that you set yourself up for the qualifying lap by nailing down the final turns, as if you get a fast exit, you'll be able to get a pretty good start to a new lap. And as I mentioned earlier, Slipstream qualifying is pretty much going to be a thing for the higher splits, because with these slower Group 4 cars and with the kind of long main and back straights, the Slipstream benefits will outweigh the negatives from the dirty air. And if you do decide to take part in the Slipstream qualifying, you want to position yourself just right, and you pretty much want to be within the 3/4 of a second gap between yourself and the next car, as the Slipstream range is 3/4 of a second. So that Slipstream, it'll help your car accelerate faster, reach higher top speeds, but you do want to brake a little bit earlier for some of the harder braking zones, because obviously you're going faster, so you need a larger braking distance so you can make the turn and hopefully not punt the car at you. And also just make sure you nail down these turns, because even making just a small mistake through these turns can make you lose a couple tenths of a second, and for a small track like Sardegna B, those couple of tenths of a second can make a pretty big difference. And because Slipstream is going to be extremely important for qualifying and the race, you want to make sure that you're able to get a really good qualifying time. Try to qualify as high up as you can, because with Slipstream being so important here, it's actually going to make overtaking a bit difficult. And yeah, so qualify as high up as you can. Make sure you nail down those turns. And if you're in a higher split lobby, you're pretty much taking part of the Slipstream qualifying, because Slipstream qualifying in the higher splits is pretty much mandatory. And at the end of the day, if you do decide to go back to back, so you don't do the jump out and jump back in strategy, you'll get 3 chances to try to get a good qualifying time. For the race, we are doing 12 laps at Sardegna B with the Group 4 cars. We are only using the racing medium tires this time. Fuel is a ×4, and fuel is surprisingly not an issue for most, if not all cars, so there's no fuel saving needed as far as I know. And the tire wear is a ×2, so tire wear is actually not an issue, but you do want to adjust your brake balance to the right values so you don't have tire wear problems pop up. And in a way, you can be a little more flexible in terms of what brake balance you want to use for your car, but you still want to think about the tire wear, because if you're not careful with that at all, then you can make tire wear issues pop up. So for example, in my case with the Dodge Viper, normally when tire wear is an issue, I would have the brake balance anywhere from +3 to +5, but in this case, +2 seems to do the job just right. And once again, because tire wear isn't really an issue at all, you can be a bit more flexible with what kind of brake balance you want to run on your car. And as I mentioned earlier, fuel is not an issue for most, if not all cars, so this is pretty much a pretty easy zero-stop race. So as I mentioned in the qualifying section, you want to qualify as high up as you can, because just like qualifying session in the race, Slipstream is going to be extremely crucial. With the Slipstream, you'll be able to keep up with those in front of you, and as long as you're pretty much on pace with everyone, it's going to make it really difficult for those behind you to try to get a pass on you, unless they go for a massive dive bomb, which hopefully that doesn't happen. But because Slipstream is going to be pretty crucial, it's going to make it really difficult to try to go for an overtake, unless if the car in front of you just really messes it up. And that's pretty much what you're going to want to wait for. You're pretty much going to want to wait for the car in front of you to mess up before you can have a chance at trying to steal their position from them. So for example, we're 7 laps in, tire wear not really an issue, although I did have the brake balance at +1 in this race, which didn't really work out for me. But the Mazda that is behind me, he's been able to keep up with me the whole time. It's been really hard to shake him off, and pretty much as long as we're pretty much in the same pace, then it's going to be really hard for the Mazda behind to get a pass on me. So in this case, we're pretty much just sitting around and waiting for something to happen, waiting for one of us to mess up. And yeah, okay, so that happened. But anyways, if everyone is pretty much on their A game, then you're probably not going to see that much action happening in this race. But once people start to make little bits of mistakes or big mistakes, then that's when you're going to see people get really aggressive and try to go for the move. Also, the second to last turn, which is where you lift off a throttle, this turn is deceiving because it can be really easy to end up going a bit wide. You touch the grass, and before you know it, you're binning it. So just be careful with that turn. And the final turn as well, you want to make sure that you're able to nail it down. It can be really easy to mess up the final turn. You can go through it a bit too slow, or end up going through it too wide to where you pick up an off-track penalty. So just be careful around that final turn, and that's actually going to be the turn that I'm going to suggest that you want to make sure that you nail down, along with the first turn, because that first turn, there's a lot of time that can be found there. So in that run, I ended up getting a 17 minutes and 19 seconds because I ended up binning it in that run. But in the second run, I ended up doing better. I think I got a 17 minutes and 12 seconds. This time I had the brake balance at +2, which ended up working a bit better for me. And there was some tire wear, but it wasn't too much of a problem. But if tire wear is a problem for you, then once again, adjust your brake balance to one that suits you the best and also that suits the car the best in terms of trying to keep those tires in good condition. But anyways, let's move on over to places to overtake and the penalty serving zone. So the main straight, which is where we're at right now, best place to try to get the overtake done, especially with the use of Slipstream. But if you are deciding on going for a pass, make it fast and clean because you don't want to engage in long battles with anyone to the point where you lose the Slipstream of the pack of cars in front of you, because once you lose the Slipstream, then catching up to them is going to be incredibly hard, if not impossible. And as I mentioned earlier, qualifying towards the top is going to be extremely crucial for this kind of race. But I'm not really saying anything about places to overtake up until now because it's pretty much single file line until we reach the back straight. This back straight, you can try to go for an overtake, and the Slipstream isn't going to help as much through here because this straight is a little bit shorter than the main straight. And after that, it's pretty much going to be single file line from here on out, unless if the car in front spectacularly messes up a turn around here, in which it can happen in your race. But if a car messes up a turn, then that's what you can think about trying to go for a move. Also, be careful about trying to go for a pass through here because it can be really easy to accidentally push off a car into the grass and end up picking a collision penalty. But that is pretty much it for places to overtake. Once again, very situational this time around because of how Slipstream works around here. Carefully plan your moves, so if you do decide to go for a move on someone, hopefully you're able to make it fast and clean and still retain the Slipstream of the pack of cars that are ahead of you. And don't be afraid to work with other cars around you to try to either catch up to the pack of cars in front or to try to break away from those behind you. And don't forget that teamwork makes the meme work. And finally, the penalty serving zone is hanging out just after the hairpin that starts to go up the hill. So just after you go through this hairpin, the penalty serving zone is hanging out right here. So if you have a penalty to serve, you'll be serving it right here. And that is the only penalty serving zone that is here at Sardegna B. And before I go, I do want to take the time to give a shout out to Kaboom Operator. So Kaboom Operator, he often has the manufacturer practice lobbies up pretty much from the time that the next race pops up. He'll usually have a practice lobby pretty much up almost right away. And he also does do live streams on YouTube, which I'll put his YouTube channel in the pinned comment down below. But yeah, really awesome dude. He always has these practice lobbies up, and yeah, he's been able to save my hide lots of times while I was trying to panic and try to get these strategies recorded for you guys. But yeah, give him a bit of love because he definitely deserves it. He's a really awesome member of the Gran Turismo sport community. But that's all from me. I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. So this is Miss MCA wishing you a good race, and I'll see you in the next video.